But there is one absolutely key element that is missing at this moment in time, and that is preparatory work. I'm not going to go through the enormous amount of preparatory work that was done in connection with the convention itself. In theory, if the call is successful, there would be time to do some of that, although I think it would be a very restricted time pattern. But apart from that, when we had the last automatic call, which was in 1988, we had already done incredible amounts of work beforehand. For example, the legislature had, in 2 years before the referendum question, which was on the ballot in 1988, 2 years before that, the legislature had created a committee of 50 distinguished persons who were interested in all these issues. And the Committee of 50, among other things, held 9 hearings throughout the state of Illinois, hundreds of witnesses. People had an opportunity to come in and say what they thought was either good or bad about the Constitution as it existed. There were a series of very important monographs, research papers that were prepared, 10 of them, dealing with all of the major issues, the Bill of Rights, the executive article, and so forth. Those were made available long before the vote in 1988. The Illinois Commission on Intergovernmental Cooperation staffed the Committee of 50 and did some additional research of its own that became available. What else? Oh, we even had, we had not as many, but we had a few seminars for people, again, to try to provide an opportunity for discussion before the vote was taken. And this time, there is absolutely nothing of that sort, really, that is taking place. Illinois Issues is trying to get some articles done and a few things like that, but there is no huge preparatory undertaking. And I just don't see any movement or interest in the legislature to do something like that. The only thing that they have done was they passed the resolution by one vote saying that calling for a constitutional convention. I was not there. I don't know how extensive the discussion was, but there certainly was no background prepared for it. So I think that is something that is extremely important. Now, let me list a few more of the reasons why I think that a case can be made against having a constitutional convention at the present time. One is we've really got a pretty good constitution. It's modern. Very much unlike the 1870 Constitution that it replaced. And interestingly, it's been used as a model for many, many other state constitutions and constitutional conventions that have been used since then. Does it solve or even address all of our problems? Of course it doesn't. And a constitution is not supposed to do that. It's up to the legislature and the governor and the voters to determine what are today's problems and how should they be addressed and resolved. And our Constitution is no impediment to anything that is going wrong in Springfield and has been for the last year or so. There are no constitutional barriers to resolving the issues that have been plaguing us for the last couple of years. The only thing that is missing is the kind of leadership that brings those issues finally to bear. And if you change the Constitution, most of what you might want to do, I mean, I heard Pat say, for example, on a separate issue, write in a $250,000 cap on the income tax. I mean, think, that's good for maybe 1 year, and then as inflation and other things happen, $250,000 makes absolutely no sense a few years later. So you've got to go back and start all over again. But again, my major point in this is that the Constitution is not what's causing a problem in state government right now. It's the people who are there who are not doing, in my judgment, their job. And beyond that, given the partisanship and the extremism that is really a hallmark of all of today's politics, it seems to me that a constitutional convention is likely to be dominated by many of those very divisive issues that are really part of what we hear constantly today. And along with that, I would include something that I find very sad, and that is a very widespread hostility toward government. And if that continues, if it continued into a constitutional convention, what it would lead to, I suspect, are writing into the Constitution restrictions, 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 to try to keep government from doing what government is supposed to be able to do, which is reflect the people that are elected by their constituents to represent them. But the hot-button issues are inevitably going to be major issues in any constitutional convention today. They may not be the only ones, but they will be there. Whether it's, abortion, same-sex marriage, stem cell research. I've heard proposals about that. And clearly restrictions on revenue-raising powers, because some of the groups that are already out there looking for a constitutional convention want to either eliminate the income tax or put major restrictions on it. Now, a few of these issues were also issues in 1970. Abortion was an issue, but very, very different. Number one, what's happened today is that the groups on these, what I call hot-button issues, are so much better organized, so much better funded, so more vocal, so more single-issue oriented, that it completely changes the atmosphere. We managed to survive the abortion issue in 1970. It was raised, but it was sort of quietly dealt with. Do you think that could happen today? I don't. I think issues like that would be enormously powerful. We were also, in 1970, relatively free of what we all lovingly called special interests, whether they're economic or social special interests. In fact, once in a while, when we were in Springfield in 1970, we would say, doesn't anybody care what we're doing? Wouldn't somebody pay a little attention to us? We were relatively left alone, even though it was very tumultuous times. If you remember, that's when we were bombing Cambodia. There was the Vietnam War. Students were sitting in all over college campuses. But despite all of that, and maybe because of that, people allowed us pretty much to go about our business. And there was very little formalized lobbying and special interest lobbying. The farm groups were there. They cared about the property tax. The civic groups were there, the good government groups like the League of Women Voters. And interestingly enough, the only really intensely lobbied issue, branch banking. That's really important to us right now, isn't it? So that was another reason, I think, another difference between the atmosphere then and the atmosphere now.